Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Howdy. Howdy. Rodeo time, right? Howdy time. Hope everyone's doing okay. Any questions? Anything on your mind? Anything in your mind with fee simple, life estates, fee simple? We ready? Okay. Fee simple determinables, fee simple subject condition subsequent. Any questions? No? Okay, we'll start. The past few classes, the main focus has been on present interests, right? We've discussed the fee simple, we've discussed the life estate, we've discussed the fee simple determinable, we've discussed the fee simple subject to condition subsequent. But I've been secretly teaching you about the future interests. Now, if you'll notice, the book separates present interest first and then does future interests. This method makes little sense to me because while you're discussing the present interest, you need to understand what comes after this. So we've already discussed several future interests. You maybe didn't even realize it, but we have. We've discussed following the life estate, the remainder. We've discussed following the fee simple determinable, the possibility of reverter. And we've discussed after the fee simple subject to condition subsequent, the right of entry. So you already learned 3 separate future interests, and you may not have even thought much about them, but that's actually very significant. What you may not have realized is that each of the future interests that we studied, okay, belongs to one of 2 parties. The remainder, you recall, goes to a 3rd party. The possibility of reverter and the right of entry go back to the grantor. And this actually makes a big difference. Whether the future interest goes to the grantor or a 3rd party, there are a host of different rules. And I haven't made much of a big fuss about it yet because we've been discussing the present interests. But in our class today, I want to really, really drill down into the future interests in the, as the title of the chapter is called, the transferor and grantor synonymous, and the transferee, the grantee. When you see transferee, just think 3rd party. That's all it means. So our focus for today is on what happens when the future interest sometimes goes to the grantor or sometimes goes to a 3rd party. Today we will focus on the different kinds of remainders, and on our next class, we will focus on the executory interests, executory limitations. Now, I'm deliberately, again, not going to be discussing the executory limitations. I told you last time, don't worry about it. We will do this on Tuesday. We're not going to do this today. So if you ask me about it, I will skip it. In fact, there are a couple examples in the book about it. I'm going to skip those also, but I'll come back to them next week. I only want to focus today on reviewing and going over the different types of remainders. Remainders are complicated enough. We'll do the executory limits next week. Okay, any questions? All right, let's revisit this chart. Kenneth, I'll start with you. Let's fill in this chart, okay? Okay. So we have this chart, which we've spent the last few classes on, and you need to have this memorized. And if it's not in your notes, it ought to be. So Kenneth, let's walk through this, okay? What are the words which we use to convey a fee simple? What words would be used? Yeah, okay, exactly right. To A and its heirs. Very good. Okay, what's the duration of that, Kenneth? How long does that estate last for? But how long does the estate, the fee simple estate, go on for? How long? Did you say forever? I think I heard that. Yes, the answer is forever, okay? The fee simple estate goes on. And it's certainly true that when A dies, he can't keep property, but it stays in his own domain. He can sell it. He can do whatever he wishes. So, Kenneth, so with respect to the fee simple, who has the future interest? Yes, the heirs of A. Exactly right, okay? A's heirs have the future interest. Okay. All right, Kent, let's keep going. What are the phrases used to convey a life estate? You should have this in your notes. No. Do you have this in your notes? You didn't copy it down after last time. You didn't have it either? That's really disappointing. All right. Where did I start off last time? I think I was somewhere. Okay. So let's finish it up. Jesus, thank you, sir. What are the words used to convey a life estate? Exactly right. Yep. From O to A for life. Thank you, Jesus. And tell me, sir, what is then the duration of that estate? Perfect. Yeah, the life of A. Okay. And who has a future interest? Well, in this case, right, you said from O to A for life. So who has a future interest? Yes. O has a future interest. In this situation, Jesus, what do we call the future interest? Exactly. O has reversion. Now, Jesus, how do you know it's reversion? Exactly. So who does it go back to? Yeah. And what do we call O in this situation? Yes, exactly right. 100% right. Okay. O has reversion. We know this because O is the grantor, and it's not going to the third party. It goes back to the grantor. Reversion is when you have a life estate, and then the future interest goes back to the grantor. Everyone with me so far? All right, let's go back up top here. George? Yes, sir. Let's talk about the other example, and then Jesus gave one that's exactly right. What if I said from O to A for life, then to B and his heir? This is the second type of life estate which we studied. George, in this case, what's the duration of life estate? Oh, I give up. What's the duration of the estate? That one's easy. Yes, sir. The duration is the life of A. Okay. Now, here comes the tricky part, George. Who has a future interest in this situation?
B and his heirs have a remainder in B simple.
100% correct. Exactly right. Right. B and his heirs have remainder. I spelled it wrong. Remainder in fee simple. And George, how do we know it's remainder and not reversion? See, you guys didn't even realize it, but I was teaching you future interests. Third party. My mind's elsewhere. You didn't even realize I was just like secretly teaching future interests when you did the reading for today. I was like, oh, I know this already. You're welcome. I don't know why the book does it like this. They try to divide up one chapter of present, future, but they mention remainders early on, and they come back again. It's way too complicated. So everyone get the distinction between reversion and remainder, right? Okay, this will matter because later in class, we're going to chop remainder into these vested and contingent. So the umbrella is remainder. In fact, I've been very coy, right? This is not just a remainder. It's actually a vested remainder. I've been not using that word deliberately, but we'll get to that later in class. So let's go on, Matthew, sir. Let's go on to the other estates, the defeasible estates. How would you write up a fee simple determinable? What words would you use to describe that? Yeah, exactly. From O to A, so long as Blackacre used as a school, whatever, right? Easy. So then how would we describe the duration of that estate, sir?
For as long as they use it.
Yeah. It's durational, right? It's for the duration of the condition, right? You can so long as, until, these are durational periods. Now, here comes the hard one, right, George? I'm sorry, Matthew. How would we describe the future interest in this case? Exactly, right? And I'm glad you said that, right? It's not possibly reversion. Make sure you say possibility of reverter. And he's not here today, but if you notice at one point in the reading, it said it reverts back. And when you read it, it's like, don't say that. It's exactly right. Carl's not here for me to pick on him, but don't say it. Just say goes back or comes back. So you're right. It's a possibility of reverter in fee simple. Now, Kaylee, ma'am, tell me please. In order for this condition to be triggered, does OF take any steps, any legal action to reclaim the land? No. What happens once the school is torn down, the condition's violated? What happens at that moment? That's the magic word, automatic, okay? The possibly reverter is automatic. Okay, no steps, no legal steps required. The second the school is torn down, it belongs to O. Okay? Now, again, I want to flag this. The future interest here is in the grantor. Okay. Notice I didn't say from O to A, so long as it's to school, if not to B, right? Be very careful, because once you say from O to A, so long as blah, 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 then to B, we're in executory limitation land. That's the other thing I'm not talking about today. But here we're only talking about grantor and grantee, two parties. Okay, Anna, please, can you tell me, how would I write up, with what words would I write up a fee simple subject to condition subsequent? What words would I use for that?
From O to A, but
Yeah. Okay. So from O to A, but if Blackacre not used as a school, O has right of entry. Okay. And notice I wrote it like this. I didn't say from O to A, but if Blackacre is not used as a school, to C. I did not say that. We're only here talking about a grantor and a grantee. It gets much more complicated when a third party is involved. So Anna, what do we call the future interest? I mean, it's up there, but what do we call the future interest for the fee simple subject condition subsequent? Exactly, and I even put it there. O has the right of entry in fee simple. Right of entry in fee simple, and again, I skipped over this one, but it's a conditional duration. Conditional duration. Okay. Thank you, Anna. Nothing new here. Nothing new. Everyone get this? Yes, sir.
Don't O and his heirs have right?
You're right. O and his heirs. And it's really the same here. Although technically, I already said that, didn't I? Actually, I don't need to write that. I just want to say fee simple. That implies heirs, but you're right. It goes to O and his heirs, but the fact that I write fee simple suggests the same that you just said.
So both answers would be right.
Yeah, actually, in fact, this is redundant, but for my purpose of your notes, I can be redundant, but either one would be adequate. In fact, not either one. Better than saying his heirs, tell me fee simple. You're actually telling me the nature of the estate. His heirs would be correct, but fee simple is probably better. But they're both absolutely correct. Everyone with me? There's nothing new. This is all stuff we've done last week. No questions here, right? All right. So again, in each of the defeasible states, we're only talking about a grantor and a grantee. And the only time where third party is involved is with the reversion. So for the remainder of class, I want to discuss the different kinds of interest. So let me write this out. So we've discussed three interests retained by the transferor. And by the way, and again, transferor and grantor, they're synonymous, right? They're synonymous. So you can see them interchangeably. So we have a reversion, and we said that follows a life estate. Okay. We have the possibility of reverter. That follows the fee simple determinable. And we have the right of entry. And that follows the fee simple subject to condition subsequent. Okay. You need to memorize these. You need to have these cold, right? When the future interest is retained by the grantor or the transferor, it can be reversion, it can be a possibly reverter, or it can be right of entry. And then you need to know what comes before it. You got to go fluent, back and forth. You need to know right of entry, fee simple, subject, condition, subsequent, or fee simple, subject, condition, subsequent, right of entry. And the reason why, and you'll see this probably next week, is some of the examples are so complicated, you may not be able to figure out what the present interest is, but you'll know what the future interest is. And if you know what the future interest is, you can link it back to what the present interest ought to be. Let me say it again. You'll do some examples that get really complicated where the present interest won't be clear. So you actually have to go back to the future, no pun intended, but go to the future interest and then work your way backwards. So you got to be fluent both ways. Okay? So just have these memorized cold. I mean, you can keep a list in your note, but you got to memorize them cold. Okay? There are three interests where it's retained by the transferee. And again, transferee means third party, someone who's not O or A, to make it more palpable. So there's the remainder, right? And we've discussed the remainder from O to A for life, then to B and his heirs. When, after a life estate, it goes to a third party, remainder, nothing new. But what I'm adding today is that there are two kinds of remainders you have to think about. There's vested remainder, and there's contingent remainder. Okay? So a remainder follows a life estate, and there are two kinds. A contingent remainder and a vested remainder. We'll do the rules. So again, if you know that there's something following a life estate and it goes to a third party, you say, okay, that's got to be a remainder. Then you go back and figure out which remainder it is. The other type is what's called an executory interest. Okay? An executory interest. This follows a defeasible estate. And again, we said last week the defeasible estates are the fee simple determinable or the fee simple subjectification subsequent. Now, I'm deliberately calling this a defeasible estate because the rules get funky with executory interests. So I don't want you to write in your notes, after a fee simple subject to a condition subsequent, if it goes to a third party, it's executory interest. Don't write that. If following some sort of defeasible estate, the future interest goes to a third party, the future interest is called an executory interest. Okay? We'll do that next week. I don't want to say anything else about it now, but just know that much. Today, we are only talking about a remainder following a life estate. A remainder following a life estate. Yes, ma'am.
Just for purposes, so I write it correctly on the exam, is it interested, retained by transfer?
Did I make a typo? Oh, it's interest, sorry.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
You know, it's funny. I always try to type these notes as accurately as possible. And in years past, I once got an evaluation from a student saying it makes me typos. And I was like, okay, I'll do my best. So if you see that I make a spelling mistake or I type the wrong word, please tell me. I much prefer this format to a PowerPoint because the PowerPoint, it's stuck. I can't change it. Here, I can actually develop these and react spontaneously as the class develops. So the downside to that is occasionally I'll make a typo, which I sincerely apologize for. Yes, ma'am.
Also, for the wording, when it's going to a transferee or a third party, do you want us to say retained by the transferee or goes to?
They're synonymous.
They are
The same thing. I saw a hand somewhere else. Do you want to have a hand? I thought I saw another one. Okay. So let's start by talking about remainders. Okay, and let's go to page 277, please, in your books. There are a lot of examples in the reading for today and also for the next couple classes. And I want to walk through these very carefully. People always ask me, oh, what commercial outline, whatever. Do the examples in the book. They're pretty good. And I like them. So where does that have to? Christian, please. Can you just read example number 1 on the bottom of 277? This one's an easy one.
O conveys one figure to A for life.
Good. Okay. So, and then, I mean, the answer is in the next sentence, but I want you to walk me through. Who has the present interest in this one, Christian? What's the present interest here? And don't cheat by reading the next sentence.
No, okay.
Nah, you'd never.
Present interest is A.
Yes, and what do we call as present interest?
Oh, life estate.
Okay, good. And how do we know this?
Because it's the life.
Yeah, okay, good. But I'm doing this methodically. These get worse. Okay, now, Christian, just finish it up. Who has a future interest in this case?
I think O still has it.
And what do we call a future interest? What do we call the future interest after a life estate that goes back to the grantor? No. See, and I'm glad. I'm actually glad you said that. Because what's the right answer? It's not possibly reverted. What do you call it?
Reversion.
Reversion. But you see what he did, right? I'm not picking on you. But you see how easy it's confused the possibly reverter and reversion, right? And you even want to say it because there's a possibility, there's a chance they go back to them, right? You want to say it. Drill this into your heads. Reversion and possibility reverted are not the same thing. I think I warned you last week that someone confused them. It took not even one class. And Christian, I'm not picking on you. This is a very easy mistake to make. No, and I'm glad you make it because it's a teaching moment, as we say, right? It's a teaching moment. So yes, so O has reversion in fee simple. No problem there, right? All right.
So you know I didn't cheat.
I know if you're. I appreciate your honesty. The answer was the next sentence. So, so Ashley, yeah, Ashley, please. You want to read number 2, please, and don't cheat either. Just read the first sentence. If you can help yourself. Everyone's reading ahead. Yeah. Okay. So let's take this one step at a time, Ashley. This one actually is a little bit trickier than it looks. Who has a life estate, Ashley?
I'm not reading it.
Who has the present interest? Who has the present interest? I do this all the time. I'm sorry. Who has the present interest? A, yes, ma'am. And what do we call his estate? Okay, good. So we know present interest A is a life estate. Okay, so Ashley, before you read anything else, what do we call the future interest that follows a life estate without fail? What must it be? In this case, right? What do we call the future interest that follows a life estate? Is it going back to the grantor?
No, so the remainder.
Okay, just say remainder for now. We'll elaborate on it later. She's exactly right. Because here, there's B, right? There's B. There's some third party name. It's not just O and A. It's O, A, and B. So we know that it's not going to be reversion. It's going to be remainder. Okay? Very good, Ashley. So I'll go on to Brent. Brent, in this case, it says to O for life, comma, then to B and her heirs if B survives A. Okay? So what happens if B survives A? What happens if B lives after A in this case?
Then it goes to B.
Good. Now, Brent, here comes the tricky one, right? What happens if B dies in a horrific chuck wagon accident at the rodeo, right? Before, what, too soon? Before. What happens if B dies first?
Then it O gets
Oh, so good, right? That's exactly right. So look what's carefully going on here. At first blush, right? You're like, oh, this is easy. That's remainder, right? If, in fact, B survives A, he gets it in fee simple. No problem. However, if B dies first, as Brent said correctly, reversion to O. O is reversion. So here we actually have 3 parties. If you can read the next sentence, O has reversion in fee simple, and then B would have a remainder. Now, we know here from reading later that this is what we call a contingent remainder. Why? Because it's not certain to happen. There's a condition that it happens first. We'll get there in a minute. But you can see in the exact same question, right? You can have both a reversion and a remainder floating around. They're stacked in priority. So first comes the remainder, and if that doesn't come through, then there's reversion. So whenever you see 3 names in the grant, you have O, A, and B. You get 3 names, right? Keep an eye on that you may have both remainder and reversion. Okay? Any questions on that one? Let's do number 2. You want to read it, please, Caitlin? Example number 2. It's at the bottom of the page. O conveys Blackacre.
O conveys Blackacre to A for life.
Good.
And B for life. O subsequently dies to the wall dividing all of O's property to C. Then A dies and B dies. Who owns Blackacre?
Okay. So we start off, Caitlin, right? It says O conveys Blackacre to A for life and to B for life. So what is the present interest here?
A. I'm sorry, life estate.
So A is a life estate, right? What's the future interest here? Good. Remainder of fee simple to whom? Exactly right. I'm sorry. Use your remainder fee simple. What does B have? You were so close. What is B's future estate? Not fee simple. Yes. So think what we have here, right? The present interest A is a life estate. As Caitlin said, the future interest is B as remainder, but it is not a remainder in fee simple. It's remainder in life estate. B has remainder in life estate. So, Zachary, what happens when B dies in that situation?
The property, or C has a reversion of the property under O's will.
Yes. Well, initially, O has reversion. Everyone see that? O did not give away everything he had. He took his fee simple, right, and chopped it up. He gave a life estate to A, followed by a life estate to B. But when B dies, there's reversion to O. So O has reversion in fee simple. O has reversion in fee simple. I mean, in this case, O happened to leave his property to C, which is fine. So C gets the reversion. So when A dies and then B dies, C gets it in fee simple. Yes, ma'am.
This might be a really silly question. So do you never qualify reversion or life estate with A? Like you always say B has reversion, not B.
Oh,
has
wow.
Reversion.
You know, it's an interesting question. I've seen it written both ways. I don't know why I say it this way. Perhaps I don't want to add additional A's because that's often a character in these questions. Like there's A, so I don't want to say he has A aversion.
Okay.
Sorry, he has A reversion because somebody think that A has reversion.
Okay.
So I dropped the pronoun.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't know.
You know, I'd never had anyone ask that question. I think I instinctively do it to avoid confusion. But if you said he has A reversion or he has A remainder, that's fine. But I think internally, if I say he has A remainder, you may think, oh, A is a remainder, which may not be, but
Okay,
grammar.
good. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, JL.
Okay, so does reversion go back to O and then the estate makes it go to C, or how does that work?
Well, so in this case, because O's already dead, right? It's really O and his heirs, and as a matter of law, O and his heirs means C because under the will. So by operation of the will, C steps into the shoes of O, if that makes sense.
So when you say that property never goes
Nowhere.
without ownership,
Yeah.
then
Immediately goes to C. By operation of the will. So for example, initially, right, if we just written this out, it says O to A for life and to B for life, right? At this point, the future interest was a reversion in O and fee simple, right? It was a reversion O and fee simple. The second he wrote this will, he was substituting in C for himself. And actually, he wrote the will and died. Because you can always revoke a will before you die. But had the will and died, then C got everything. Everyone get that one, right? So what gets complicated here is you can actually stack. I'll get you into in a second. You can actually stack a remainder with another remainder followed by reversion. Crazy, right? These get even worse. Yes, sir.
So, even if C is a third party, we call it reversion, even though
C is not a third party, and I'll make that very clear. C got his interest from the grantor. That's why I said to Joel a minute ago, C stepped into the shoes of O.
So he's basically the grantor.
Yes, he's treated as if he's the grantor. He's the grantor's heirs. C is not a third party. Okay, so for example, if it said from O to A for life, then to B for life, then to C and his heirs, like that, that would be an executory interest, which I don't want to cover today. C steps into shoes of O. That's very deliberately worded. I saw a hand over there somewhere.
Yeah, that was my question. C would have reversion or a remainder.
In this case, he steps into the shoes of O. That's what you have to think of. He's basically inheriting O's interest. And you inherit an interest, you are in the same position as the grantor in the first place. But very good question, both of you. Had it been to A for life, then to B for life, then to C and his heirs, that would have been an executory interest, which I'm not covering today because there are different rules. But that's how you would frame it. But you could imagine there's blurry between the two of them, and you can see how this gets even worse. But in this case, the way they frame this question, O has the will, C steps into O's shoes. Okay. Any questions on that?
Yeah, so
Oh, I'm sorry, Landon. I didn't see you. Sorry.
C has fee simple and reversion, or
Yeah, you would say C has a reversion in fee simple. It's exactly right. And frankly, once A and B die, C gets a fee simple, period. Because I think as this question's framed, C has a fee simple.
Okay.
Good. Yes, sir.
It's the will that makes him.
Yes.
Okay.
By operation of the will, C steps into O's shoes.
Okay.
Right? They're basically the same person at that point, at least for purposes of Blackacre. Yes.
You might have answered this now, but depending on how the question is asked, for instance, it said who owns Blackacre as opposed to before people die. I'm assuming the answer to this question you said was C has fee simple. You don't mention all the.
So actually, I mean, to be frank, I don't like the way the book frames this question. Who owns Blackacre? That's a poor framing of the question. If you notice what I asked, I said who has the present interest and who has a future interest, right? The question I asked forces you to, and I know a lot of people have asked me at the exam, I will almost always in the exam describe the future and present interests in a given piece of property. Because I don't want you to say, oh, well, A has a fee simple now. That doesn't tell me anything. I want to know, like, 2 questions. Who owns it and when do they own it? If you answer those 2 questions, you'll see this topic makes so much more sense. So much more sense. Whereas there, they just say, who owns Blackacre? Well, that doesn't guide you in the right direction. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So if you want the present interest here would be considering that A has a life estate, B has a B.
Well, B, the present interest A is a life estate, and then B has a remainder in life estate.
Okay.
Ah.
But then also C has
Oh.
O actually has a reversion.
Yes, but the priority, right? So there's sequence. So the first future interest is remainder for B in life estate, and then
Another life estate in B, which is the remainder,
and then
O is reversion.
bingo. Yeah, you stack them, and the way you read it, you notice they're commas, right? Punctuation. The punctuation is your friend. Use the punctuation to guide you to the right answer. I will almost always, if I forget, I'm sorry, but I will almost always try to, when I'm typing examples up, use commas because you can use it to guide. Okay, any other questions on this one? This was actually a hard example, but I think you, at least 80% of you understand 80% of it, I suppose. I think I'm in good shape. Any other questions on this? Okay. The book then goes on to talk about the possible reverter, which you already know. Again, I don't know why the book lays stuff out like that. It's repetitive, but I think everyone understands the fee simple determinable is followed by the possibly reverter. Any questions on that? I don't think I need to go over that again. And again, the book tells next the right of entry. The fee simple subject condition subsequent is paired with the right of entry. This is, this list of 3 things. You have to just memorize that. All right. Any other questions on the defeasibles? All right. Let's move on to discussing the different types of remainders. Okay. There are 2 types of remainders. There's vested remainders and there are contingent remainders. I like to start with vested remainders. Right? So the example we've given 100 times, right? From O to A for life, then to B and his heirs, right? This is the example I've given you 1,000 times. A has a life estate, B has remainder and fee simple, O has nothing, right? A has a life estate, B has remainder and fee simple, O gets nothing. Yes. Catherine, how do we know the situation? Well, not just because he named a third party. Will A die? Everyone dies, okay? No one is immortal. Socrates is mortal, he's a man, everyone dies. What happens the moment A dies? And what do we call B's estate? Yeah. B gets a fee simple, right? So we say B has remainder fee simple. There is a 100% chance that A will die. There's no uncertainty whatsoever. Everyone dies. The instant A dies, B gets a fee simple. B gets a fee simple. 100% certain, okay? So, Jackie, what happens if B dies before A? What happens in that situation? Yes, even if B dies first, B's heirs step into his shoes. And then B's heirs have remainder and fee simple, right? So there is 0% chance, zero, that this ever goes to O. There is a 100% chance this will either go to B or to B's heirs. Everyone get that? We call this a vested remainder, okay? We call this a vested remainder. And what vested means, you'll see this phrase in other contexts of the law. What vested means is certain to occur. For example, you have a vested right. Or if you're at a retirement plan, it was vested because you had it certain to provide you with money. It's vested. Okay. Now, it's one thing for me to say vested means certain to occur. But the book, and not just the book, but the law has developed two conditions that both must be met in order for remainder to be vested. Important. You need to meet both of these, not just one, both of these. Okay? So these two conditions, okay? A remainder is vested if, okay? So first, it's given to an ascertained person. What the heck does an ascertained person mean? I will give you a very easy tip. It means someone who is named, okay? Someone who is named. If I say from O to A for life and to B and its heirs, well, B is named. B has a name. I know who B is. He's ascertained. Maybe ask yourself, well, when would it ever be? No pun intended. But how could it ever possibly be that someone is not named? Well, what if I said to B's children? Okay. Or what if I said to B's heirs? We don't know someone's heirs till they die. Or what if I said, give you a preview of things to come, to any daughters born to my daughter. To any daughters born to my daughter. My daughter is 4 years old. She has no kids yet. But I could say to any daughters born to my daughter. We know who these people are. So we have this weird thing in property where occasionally you want to leave land to someone who's not yet ascertained or not someone who's known. You can even leave property to a fetus in utero. Although interestingly enough, those are actually ascertained because it's a person in existence. So the first condition is you have to give it to an ascertained person. The way you know this is if there's a name, A, B, C, Josh, Bill, whatever, right? Then the person's ascertained. The second condition, this one's a little bit harder. Again, and. Second condition is it's not subject to a condition precedent. Now, wait a minute. Didn't we just do the condition subsequent? Why would we do condition precedent? This is why I told you don't use abbreviations, because you'll confuse them. See, I promise everything makes sense. A condition subsequent is what we did last week. A condition subsequent is something that comes after, right? I give you Blackacre today, but if tomorrow you tear it down and turn it into a factory, I get it back. Condition subsequent, condition after the fact. A condition precedent, as I'm sure you figured out from contracts by now, is a condition that happens before or prior to the grant. Okay? It's a condition that happens before. All right? And in this case, never lose sight of the fact that we're always talking about a remainder following a life estate. So Josh has it for life, right? And then to B, if B outlives A, right? Blackacre to Josh for life, and then goes to Bill if Bill outlives Josh. What if Bill doesn't? Well, then it doesn't get it. The condition precedent, right, has to be something other than the natural death. Okay? Don't get cute here. You say, well, look, from O to A for life, then to B and his heirs, right? The condition precedent is A dying, right? The condition precedent is A dying. Don't take the bait. Don't do that. A natural death is not a condition precedent. In order for there to be condition precedent, it must be something other than a natural death. Okay. You need to establish both of these conditions for a remainder to be vested. Don't fall into the trap and say, oh, from O to A for life, then to B and his heirs. Oh, yeah, that's vested. It's certain to happen. You need to answer these two questions because we will do some examples where it becomes very fuzzy what's what. So work through these two. So I want to walk through a couple examples. Okay, so Ross, let's consider this one. I'll type on the board. So it says from O to A for life, then to B and his heirs. Okay, this is the exact same example we did before, but I want you to walk us through the future interest, right? So the present interest is the life estate. What follows a life estate and the third party is remainder. Is this a vested remainder, Ross, or a contingent remainder? Walk through the two questions. Ask yourself. What's the first question? Yeah, so what's the first question to determine if it's vested? Ascertained, not certain, but ascertained. Okay. Is the remainder given to an ascertained person, Ross? Who is the ascertained person? B. How do we know B is ascertained? He's named. Okay, so the first box is checked. B is named, B is ascertained. Therefore, the remainder, the future interest, is in a person who's ascertained. Okay, now, Ross, finished up. What's the second condition? Okay. It's vested if it's not subject. Let me underline the word not. Make sure you put this in your notes. It's vested if it's not subject to condition precedent. Not. Ross, what condition triggers this future interest? Okay. Is this not a condition precedent? What? You're too many double negatives. Let me say this like this. If it's a natural death, right? If it's a natural death, is that a condition precedent? No. Let's one more time. If it's a natural death, it is not a condition precedent. Therefore, Ross, is this not subject to a condition precedent? Yes. The double negatives are confusing. Let me say it one more time. I know that's a little tricky. Here, the future estate follows a death, a natural death. That's not a condition precedent. And because it's not a condition precedent, the remainder is vested. This condition is true. It is not subject to a condition precedent. Right? So let me write this out because I know the double negatives always give people a loop, right? So it's 1, B is ascertained, and 2, it follows a natural death, and it's not subject to condition precedent. Therefore, it's a vested remainder in B, or you can say vested remainder in fee simple in B. Use it however you wish. Okay.
In this case, the condition precedent that we're talking about is the preceding estate, right? Not subject to a condition precedent in the preceding estate.
Yes, and don't say preceding because the preceding and precedent get too complicated, right? So you go before the comma, right? So the way you look at it is what comes before the comma from ode for life, right? That is a life estate.
Yes, the reason why I'm saying the preceding state and my accent doesn't help, but it's
It's
the
okay.
second part because these heirs. I mean, if he doesn't have heirs and he like dies,
Everyone is heirs.
there are no heirs.
No, everyone is heirs.
Okay. Oh, the cousins that.
Don't worry about Eshiat, and I mean that sincerely. Don't let the Eshiat throw you astray. Everyone is heirs. Again, unless I give you an example where there's a mass epidemic and like smallpox outbreak and millions of people die, everyone is heirs.
Okay.
I promise you. I'm not going to try to trick you on this because the Eshiat rules are surprisingly complicated, annoyingly complicated. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a reason of legal saying natural death?
Kind of. I'll answer that question in a few minutes. The answer will become clear in a couple minutes. I don't want to give it away yet, but yes, right. I suppose an artificial death, you pop a pill. I don't know, right? So come back to that later, okay? Everyone with me so far? Let's do another example. And let's wait for Alyssa, please. Let's try this. So it says, from O to A for life, then to B's children. Okay, and I'm going to give you the condition: B has no children. Okay, that's the condition. So Alyssa, ask yourself, what are our two questions to determine whether the remainder is vested or contingent? Good, number one, okay? So number one, was the Blackacre given to an ascertained person? The answer is no. Why is there not? Right, there are no named children. There's no named children. It's not ascertained. We don't know who this person is. We have no idea. Okay? We don't even need to go into the second condition, right? Because if either of them are false, it's vested. I mean, it's contingent. If either of them are false, it's contingent. We don't even have to go into the second question. I will ask Alyssa in a moment anyway. But as soon as you find one of the conditions is false, it has to be a contingent remainder. Okay? Melissa, just for fun. I know this is fun, right? Does this follow a natural death? Is there a condition precedent here? Is there a condition precedent? Why is there no condition precedent? That's right. Yes, exactly right. It's not subject to condition precedent because it follows a natural death. Okay? You need, trust me, just work through both of them in any event because it'll come into play later. I like to describe this topic as like a cake, and we keep adding layer upon layer upon layer. And if you miss a layer in the middle, the entire cake falls apart. So just work through each of the steps. Don't take a shortcut now or later, but definitely don't take it now. So this is indeed contingent remainder, right? So we would say, to give you the summary, there's a contingent remainder in fee simple in B's children. Okay. Now, Jake, here comes the tricky part. B has no kids, right? B dies childless. A then dies. What happens to Blackacre? What do we call that? Exactly. O is reversion of fee simple. Perfect answer. Right? Because following the contingent remainder, there's still doubt, right? There's still uncertainty. And at any given moment, property always has to have someone to fall back to. You cannot have a piece of property floating in the wind. It doesn't work, right? So O always keeps reversion. Had he said to B and his heirs, he gives everything away. But by saying to B's children, he understands, well, B's, kind of old, whatever, doesn't have any kids, goes back to O. Right? Yes, ma'am.
Do we ever use the words vested or contingent with the word reversion?
Oh God, no, don't even.
Okay, never. Okay.
Don't even. Don't. No. Don't add. Please don't add additional words to make this topic even more uncomfortable. I saw a hand over there somewhere.
So even though O gets reversion eventually, it's correct to say these children have contingent.
Yeah, and you have to do the order, right? You say B's children have a contingent remainder in fee simple, and if that doesn't pan out, O has reversion.
So you need to weigh it all the way out.
That's why if you look at the old exam questions I give, I'll say, what are the, this is the Cyrus question before, I'll say, what are the present and future interests for A, B, and C? I'll ask that very clearly. And I might say, if C has no interest, tell me that. If B has no interest, tell me that. But I want you to say for A, B, and C, were there present or future interests? I saw a hand over there. Cody, did your hand up?
I didn't, but so in that case, President Madrid for A, B, and C. No, I do have a question. Sorry.
But what's your question?
Could I just say, like, if could you say the present interest in the land? You know, A and C have nothing. B has
Yeah.
life estate, and then you say future.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, spell it out. That tells me that you understand the full consequence of the estate from top to bottom. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
When you say contingent remainder in fee simple and these children, why is it not in life estate? Because it's just 2A for
So, okay, I can make this better. Remember on the first day I said occasionally you don't need to say and his heirs, and I promised you I'd always say that. I just broke my promise. So the better reading is when it says to B's children, it's understood and their heirs. That's the modern construction, but you're right. I think you're pointing that out. Right? But in any event, it's only contingent remainder. If there are no children, there's still reversion to O. Everyone with me? Okay. Everyone okay with this one? All right, I'm going to change it up now, okay? I'll use the exact same example. The exact same example I gave a minute ago. How? Is someone raising a hand? Okay. Okay, I'll give the exact same example I gave a minute ago, but I'm going to change it a little bit. So it's like this. From O to A for life, then to B's children, right? Same example, but I'm going to say it like this. B has a child, C. Oh. B has a child, C. He has one kid, okay? Then, what do? So, all right, Tim, so we know, of course, A has a life estate, right? A has a life estate. We need now to understand the future interest. So what do we call the future interest following a life estate? This is the easy part. Generally.
Yeah, B's got a remainder.
Well, B, does B have a remainder? Who has the remainder? Not B.
I don't see.
No. It's not just C either. Who has remainders in this case? What's the category? What's the class of people who get the remainder?
Well, children.
Okay, this is where it gets trickier, okay? So follow me here. There's a remainder, okay? There's a remainder for B's children. Now, this is where it gets tricky, Tim. I want you to ask yourself the two questions, okay? With respect to C, is C ascertained? Okay, so number one, C is ascertained, okay? Good. Tim, is there a condition precedent involved? Is there a condition precedent? On what condition does C take?
C takes all of the kids.
But what condition? Follow the question. Is there a condition precedent here, Tim?
I
there's no condition precedent, right? Right? It follows a natural death. Okay, so Tim, finish up. How would we describe C's future interest? Yeah, C has a vested remainder and fee simple. And I'll just make this easier, and their heirs. Make it easier. Okay? Everyone see this. C has a vested remainder and fee simple. Okay? So at the moment this deed is drawn up, right? At the moment this deed is drawn up, C, who's already alive and ascertained, has a vested remainder and fee simple. Okay? Yeah.
I guess I'm confused. How is C ascertained? Because C is a name. Only these children.
But one of B's children is C.
Okay. So,
C is a named person in that class.
okay.
Yeah. You mean whatever?
If
I
the
don't care.
child is born after the deed is written, does it go from unascertained to ascertained?
Okay, it actually depends if the child is in utero while the deed's being written. As I mentioned before, a child in utero is actually considered a living person for purposes of property.
But if they're not,
Okay, let's just say there's no, no kids yet. But I want to answer your question in a minute. But Cody, you have a question?
Okay, so let's say A dies, C then has the present interest, and then if C were to die, B would then have an interest. If C didn't have children of their own, as like the ancestral,
That doesn't matter.
okay, so B doesn't have any kind of remaining future interest.
Well, B has nothing, right? But I want to actually answer Adam's question now. B's still alive in this situation, right? B is still alive in the situation. C, if he's an only child, gets everything, right? C as an only child gets everything. But what happens if he gets a brother or a sister? Brian, what happens if C gets a brother or a sister? What happens to those kids? Okay. As children are born, okay, while B's still alive, as new children are born to B, those people now join the class of the children of B. That's family, right? As B has new kids, they join the class. And then, oh, by the way, C now has to share, right? Brothers and sisters hate to share, but C has to share. So even though he has a vested remainder, because we did our two conditions, right? C has what's called, and here's a new phrase, he has a vested remainder fee simple, here's a new one, subject to open. Subject to open. Okay? Okay? There's a vested remainder subject to open. Because he may need to share this down the line. Indeed, you could even say, right? This is not exactly right, but I'll write here that C's potential siblings, right? Right? I won't write because it's wrong, but C's siblings can join that class, right? So we say it's a vested remainder that's subject to open, and there are different ways of framing it. But the general idea is, if C has new brothers or sisters, he has to share. Yeah.
The category of children is ascertained, and then C, we already know who has best remainder simple, and then it's subject to open if B has more kids, right?
What has to happen is that as long as B can have more children while A is alive, the class is still open. The class only closes when B dies. And here's one of the quirky aspects of property. I'll get to you in a second. What? No, when B dies. The class closes when B dies. Because B can have children as long as B is alive. Right? As long as B is alive, the class can expand. C's already there, right? C has heirs. So even if B dies and then A dies, C gets the property. But I'm talking about the class of children. The class of children can keep growing so long as B is alive. I'll get you 1 second. And one of the quirks of property law, you'll learn about this soon. It's actually a very jarring concept. There's a doctrine called the fertile octogenarian. I swear. The fertile octogenarian. An octogenarian is someone in their 80s. Property law presumes that so long as someone's alive, they can give birth. even if a woman is in her 80s, right? This is long for modern medicine, right? Even if a woman is in her 80s, you presume the woman can give birth. The flip side to that one is actually a disturbing concept called the precocious toddler, which presumes that no matter how young a person is, they can still give birth. So even if you have, we'll talk about this later. This is why property law gets messed up. So as long as B is alive, no matter how old or young B is, we presume they can still pop out kids and create new children, which makes the class subject to open. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say that A has died, and so
Once A dies, that's the ball game, right? It then goes to whoever the living children are at that moment.
right, but so B has more children, the property will not be distributed to them, or it will?
If there are more children born to B during the life of A, then they share it.
But if A's life is over, then
That cuts it off, yeah. Yeah, because in this situation, say there's only one kid. Once A dies, it goes to C and his heirs. Okay? Goes to C and his heirs. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Blind spot.
Would a sperm bank complicate this at all?
So the short answer, and actually, I want you to read from my notes. I swear to God.
Fantastic.
No, read it loud.
Frozen embryos do not count.
Frozen embryos don't count. So unless you think I don't prepare for class, it was in my notes. No, frozen embryos don't count. If they're inseminated and fertilized, that is considered in utero, right? Once God, it's like sex ed, right? Once the egg is fertilized and implanted in a woman, then it's considered a living person for purposes of property law. But the frozen egg itself, until it's fertilized, is not deemed a child. But once the child is the egg's fertilized and it's implanted, at that point, so you actually have cases, and this is actually this happens a lot, where couples will freeze sperm and eggs. They want to have children later in life, and then they get divorced. Okay, and then it's usually the woman, but it can go either way. But the woman takes the egg and takes the sperm and fertilizes it, and then she then claims, even without the consent of the current consent of the ex-husband, that that's now a child who's entitled to inheritance, and this creates very thorny issues. I don't know how these ones work out, but it gets complicated. Yes, ma'am.
So children are limited to genetic children.
Ask the question one more time, please.
So we are limiting child to genetic.
So the laws actually evolved that now adopted children can take as if they were biological children. But that was actually developed in the law. No. Adopted children can take from their adopted parents. And I think I'm not sure about this. I think the act of adoption severs any ties to biological parents. I think that's right. But for a long time, adopted children were not deemed people who could inherit. But the law changed now allow adopted children to inherit from their adopted parents as children. Yeah.
Same question, but about stepchildren.
About what?
Stepchildren. You married.
I mean, if they're not adopted, they're not your kids. I mean, a stepchild has to be adopted by the new parent, right? But if they're adopted, then they're adopted. It's like Maury Povich in class. Yeah, what else? Yeah.
So
Are you the father? No. Go ahead.
The language from the example you just gave and the one above it is pretty much the same, but so whether or not there's an ascertained person, the answer is yes in one and no in the other. It depends on whether that person actually exists. Like in the language.
Yes, sir.
It's the same. So the
Yes, sir.
person just has to be.
Yeah. And ask yourself these two questions. Right? So let me, any other questions? I'll do another example in a minute. Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna see if you could do an example.
I would be happy to. I would be happy to, ma'am. That was actually my next example. So you read my mind. Okay. So let's try this example. Okay. From O to A for life, then to B and her heirs if B marries during A's lifetime. How's that? Math good? Okay. So it says from O to A for life, comma, then to B and her heirs if B marries during A's lifetime. So where am I up to? Okay, Matthew, sir. So obviously the present interest is a life estate. It's going to a third party after life estate, so we know that B has remainder. But to ascertain or determine if it's a contingent or vested, what are our two questions we ask ourselves? Yes, B is ascertained. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. B is a named person. We know who he is. He's named. Okay. Okay, Matthew. What's our second question we ask ourselves? Is there a condition precedent here? Okay. What's the condition precedent? Okay. It's not the case here that on A's death it jumps to B. B has to do something beforehand, right? B has to do something beforehand. B must get married before A dies. This is a condition precedent. Literally, it's a condition before he dies. Okay, and so Matthew finished it up. Because this is a condition precedent, what kind of remainder does B have? Yes, sir. So we know that B has a contingent remainder. Be simple. B has a contingent remainder in fee simple. Ask yourself these two questions. And Madison, does that make sense about what a condition precedent looks like?
No.
Thank you. Good. I was like 20 seconds ahead of your question. Yeah.
So if he gets married down the line, would that
When's down the line? Be specific.
marries during A's lifetime?
Good. Yes.
Then he would have a vested.
No. I'm glad you asked that. Right. You ask yourself at the time in which this document was written. At the time in which this document was written, how would you characterize a future estate? Okay. At the time it was written, B was not yet married. Therefore, we say it's a contingent remainder. Right? Because let me change the example up. I'll change a little bit to mess with you, right? What if it says that if B is married, okay? What happens if B gets married and then gets divorced? Oh, you can get unmarried, right? So effectively here, he has to be married at the time of A's death, right? He's married during A's lifetime. If he gets divorced, well, he's no longer married. So you have to ask yourself the question at the time the instrument's drafted, and then at A's death, you calculate it. Yeah.
So even though it's saying married during A's lifetime, it's basically saying married during A's death.
I can rephrase it. Married at A's death. I mean, I changed it up on the fly. I think that's a little bit better. He's married at A's death. When I change examples on the fly, I don't always change all of it. So, yeah, go ahead.
So if B gets a divorce before A dies, does that stack of reversion?
Absolutely. O as reversion, right? Right? O as reversion, fee simple. If B is unmarried at A's death. Perfect. Right? If B dies a spinster, right? Then I can't say that anymore. Then it goes to O. I saw a hand in the back somewhere. Oh, good.
Does it matter if the marriage is just to get to the end here? Is there a fraud that ever?
Oh, you can have sham marriages. Come on. I mean, in feudalism, marriages were basically designed for the sole purpose of transferring property, right? This isn't just an idle example. It'd be very common in times of feudalism that father would say, to my first son, so long as he's married before my death. Okay, that gives an incentive to get married. Or, even worse, I give black eggs to my son if he marries this woman. Ooh. That's how arranged marriages work. There was actually property transactions contingent, and no pun intended, right? But there were property transactions contingent upon feudal families merging, literally, I suppose. Everyone get that? No? Let's go to example number 5 on page 282, please. Where am I up to? Mary, please read it. And just don't read the answer either. I think the answer is there as well. Okay. Example 5. Okay, so O conveys to A for life, and then to the heirs of B. All right, so we know, of course, the present interest is a life estate. It's followed by remainder. Okay. B is still alive. Okay, so who has the future interest, Mary? Yes, exactly right. Remember this. No living person has heirs. No living person has heirs. Heirs are only calculated upon a person's death. So let's ask ourselves, Mary, how would we characterize this remainder? Are the remainder men, are they ascertained? Why are they not ascertained? They don't exist yet. Exactly right. Even though it does not follow condition precedent, right? The second condition is fine. There's no condition precedent here. It follows naturally upon death. Okay? It's contingent because the heirs of B are not yet ascertained. Everyone get that one? All right. You want to try, Justin? Let's go back to example number 4 on the previous one. Go for it.
O conveys to A for life, then to A's children and their heirs.
Okay. So we know, of course, that A has a present life estate. It's followed by remainder. Okay. In the question, it tells us A has one child, B. Okay, so ask yourself, how do we understand the remainder in this case? Ask yourself these 2 questions, Justin.
Right. So first, is the person ascertained?
Okay, so is a child of A ascertained? Who is this person? What's his name?
B.
Okay, so we know that at least one of the children of A is ascertained. His name is B. Okay, second, are there any condition precedents involved here?
There are not.
There are not. It follows naturally upon death. There's no, intermediary, have to do something first. Okay. However, Justin, this is where it gets tricky. A is still alive. Can A pop out more kids?
Yes.
So what did that do in B's remainder? What do we call it? First of all, is B's remainder vested or contingent? Exactly right. B has a vested remainder. But what happens if new kids pop out, right? How do we understand then? Exactly right. We say that B has a vested remainder in fee simple that is subject to open. B has a vested remainder in fee simple that's subject to open. Why? Because he may get brothers and sisters, right? We don't know all the people in that class. And you can imagine this as practical purposes. You can sell during your life a future interest. You can mortgage a future interest. You can take a loan out on a future interest. But if a bank says, wait a minute, this is not just your future interest, it's a vested remainder subject to open, I may have to deal with your brother or sister, and I don't want to deal with them, so they won't give you a loan. So there are very practical reasons why the vested remainder subject to open works. It tells the world, look, it's vested, but my mom may have more kids, and whatever, you have to share it with everyone else. Okay? Everyone understand that? But once the mother dies, right? Once A dies, that vested remainder is closed, right? There's no more chance of opening up. You can't have a child after you're dead, notwithstanding the frozen embryos. You can't have a child after death. Although, just to mess with you, I think on one of my exams last year, I had a question where a pregnant woman got into an accident, and she was pronounced legally dead, and then he delivered the child who survived.
Oh.
So there's basically you can find it, but it was a tricky question. But the class was closed, so that'll give you a hint of how the answer comes out. Because I think if I remember the question correctly, the mom was pronounced dead, and they did an emergency C-section to remove the baby, and the baby survived. There are cases like this. These things actually do happen. I don't know if they have property disputes, but women can give birth after they're dead, but it's no longer a class that could be open. Yeah.
That's because the person was ascertained in utero.
That was one of the other wrinkles in the question, right? That was one of the other wrinkles. Because the child was ascertained in utero, could it be considered a child? It was a hard question, but there are lots of ways to answer these questions. The fact pattern made you twist and turn. I saw another hand somewhere. Go for it, yeah. You lost? Oh.
Oh, wait, no, okay. So the part with, I know that the child has to be ascertained at the time the grant was written. So the way this reads, it's like we see the grant, and then it says, okay, now A has a child, that's B. Are we just assuming that?
I will always tell you the facts. I will always tell you the facts in existence at the time the grant was made, right? Because think about it, it's shorthand. If I say, if you know, I know that A is a child named B, and I say, yo, to A's children, that includes B because B is an ascertained person, right? At the moment I write that, B is a living, breathing human being. Make sense? Let's do example number 6. You want to read it for me, Kevin? Okay, this one's a little bit trickier, okay? So we know that A has a life estate, followed by a remainder. Then to B and her heirs if B survives A. So ask yourself these 2 questions. Is the remainderman, B, is that person ascertained? Yes, we know who B is, he's named. Is there a condition precedent? Is there a condition precedent in order for B's heirs to get it?
Yes.
What's the condition precedent? Ah, okay. There is a condition precedent. You have to outlive him, right? B must outlive A. It's not following the natural death of A. B has to actually survive him. And because there's a condition precedent, this is a, what kind of remainder? Said it? Contingent, yeah. It's a contingent. Do you say conditional?
Yes.
Say contingent. It's a contingent remainder. Okay? Everyone with me so far? I want to do a couple of examples at the end of page 283. Let's see if we can do the first couple before the end of class. I think we do at least the first 3. Sarah, please. Read number 1. Okay, stop right there. A has a life estate. How do we understand the future interest here? Okay, so it's B ascertained. Is there a condition precedent? Is there a condition precedent here? No, and that's right. Why is there no condition precedent? It's a natural death. Yeah. They try and trick you, right? They say in the event of A's death, we think, oh, there's some sort of condition, but it's actually a trick question. All that says is to A for life, and when A dies, to B. Straight up life estate, vested remainder, no problems. Okay? Everyone with me? All right. Let's do number 2, please. You want to read it for me, Hunter?
O conveys A for life, then to B for life, then to C and for heirs.
Yeah, okay, now we get tricky, right? So let's take this one step at a time, Hunter. 1 comma at a time. So the life estate is present. What is the interest following the life estate?
A has a life estate.
Good. Then B.
Then B has a life estate.
Well, at the present moment, how do we describe B's interest?
B's.
What is B's interest at the present moment? A still alive.
B's is a future interest.
And how we describe the future interest after the life estate?
It's remainder.
Good. Don't forget what we've been saying all week. After a life estate, and a third party is followed by a remainder. Now, Hunter, how do we break down B's remainder? How do we characterize it?
B is the best remainder. B is main.
Yeah, okay, so first, B is ascertained. Is there any condition precedent?
I guess it would, no, because it's a natural.
Natural death. So it's ascertained, natural death. Therefore, B has a vested remainder. Good. Let's move on. Richard?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Let's talk about C. How do we describe C's future interest here? Oh, do you have a question first?
Sorry, real quick on B. Would the condition precedent not be that he's still alive?
No, because that's a natural death. It follows immediately on A's death.
But if B's dead,
No, B's heirs can take his life estate, but it only lasts for the length of A. Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying you're saying that if B dies before A, if B dies before A, it'll actually go to C, but it's still vested remainder.
so even though he or his heirs would get basically back.
It's still called a vested remainder because the answer to the two questions asked Hunter is yes. I see your point. You're exactly right. If B dies first, it jumps over to C. However, B's remainder is still vested at the time the instrument's drafted. Richard, walk me through how we describe C's interest here.
C has a remainder. Simple.
What kind of remainder? Is it vested or contingent?
The top part is vested.
Top part? What are you saying?
Well, are you talking about when it says?
Yeah. The first sentence. Yeah. 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 This one. Yeah.
So that one
is vested. Good. Exactly right. C has a vested remainder here. Why? Because he's ascertained, and it follows the natural death of B. Okay. Don't get led astray. I already see Justin's question's exactly right, but ask these two questions, and you won't be led astray. You can have a vested remainder that you never get. Right? It could be a vested remainder, and if B dies first, he gets nothing, but it's still vested, as odd as it happens to be. Okay, so now you want to change it up. Brenda, it says, what if it says to C and her heirs if C survives A and B? Right? The second part of the sentence. If C survives A and B. Exactly right. Even though C is ascertained, under this second part, there's a condition precedent. And because there's a condition precedent, that makes C's remainder contingent. Brenda, exactly right. Everyone get that? If you don't, after class, go back and you can watch the last 5 minutes of the video and go through these again, but these are important to grasp.
Isn't that one also create a reversion?
Yes, because, right? Because under the first example, it was a C and her heirs, right? C had remainder and fee simple. It will be cleaned up no matter what to C. Even if C dies, it goes to C's heirs. In this one, if C does not survive A and B, there's reversion. O has reversion. Exactly right. Let's do number 3. Erica, please read it. Okay, so this one's actually tricky. It says, you haven't done this before. So it says, O conveys to A and B for their joint lives. Erica, what do you think that means, to their joint lives? Yeah, it's for as long as they both live. Okay, so what happens if A dies first? What do you think happens, Brenda? I'm sorry, Erica. So what happens when A dies? What happens to Blackacre? What does it say? Read the grant. Read the language. Yes. So when A dies, who gets it? And what's B's estate? I'm sorry. After A dies, what does B get? Yes. Once the first one dies, the other one gets it in fee simple. Okay, so now, Eric, I'd like for you to please categorize the remainders, right? A and B both have a future interest, right? And if you think about it, it kicks in after one of them dies. So, it's remainder. We ask ourselves two questions. Are they ascertained? Is there a yes? Is there a condition precedent? Yes. What is the condition precedent? They have to survive the other one. The condition precedent number 3 is that one has to survive the other. Therefore, they both have contingent remainders in fee simple. They both have contingent remainders in fee simple. Yeah.
If they both die like in the same car wreck.
I knew you were going to ask that. So my next question for Julia is, what happens if they both die in a car wreck at the same time? I swear, you guys jump one step. There's reversion for O, right? That's really the bizarre situation, but they both die in a car wreck at the exact same time. And there are actually cases where there's actually a husband and wife in a plane together, right? And the plane goes down, and their moment of death is instantaneous. There's no survivor. It gets complicated. But did she answer your question?
Yeah. Wouldn't they probably argue, no, he lived a minute longer, so it comes to us?
Well, how do you argue that?
You have a trial and you basically.
What happened? The plane crashed. It blew up in the skies. Immediately, they were sitting next to each other.
You try and determine who lived longer.
The plane blew up in the sky. There's no. All right, let's try the last one, number 4. You want to read it, Veronica? Okay. Okay, so we know A is a life estate, right? How would you categorize B's future interest, please? Good. B as remainder. Is it contingent or vested? Precedent. Right. Okay, good. So now it gets tricky. I'm going to tease this. This is actually a preview of our future class. When B turns 21, and this was a question asked before, the remainder vests. Okay? However, A may have another child. Right? A may have another child. So at that point, it becomes a vested remainder subject to open. Right? Because another sibling may indeed reach 21. So then it becomes a vested remainder subject to open. You recategorize these interests at various junctures, because once the kid reaches 21, boom, his remainder is vested, right? There's no more condition. But another rugrat may come along and cut away his thing, so it's subject to open. All right, so any questions on that one? Yeah. Once the child reaches 21, his remainder vests, and he actually gains a vested remainder. However, like we discussed before, it's not his alone. His mother may have another child who will turn 21, so we say his remainder is vested subject to open. So at the time of the grant, right, at the time the grant is made, it's contingent. But once he gets 21, he now has a vested remainder that's subject to open. Okay? So if I can summarize briefly, you need to memorize these 6 interests, right? We did today is when you have a life estate that's followed by future interest. It's a remainder. The remainder can either be the contingent remainder or vested remainder. And you need to ask yourself, for it to be vested, you must have the persons ascertained, and there cannot be a condition precedent. If either of those conditions is true, it's a contingent remainder. You also have to consider with a vested remainder, if additional family members may be born, it may be vested remainder subject to open. Okay. Questions on this? I know this topic is tricky, and the next one will get trickier, and watch that's even trickier, but stick with me. Yeah.
The last one was vested subject to open.
Yes, sir.
It's never
Never be contingent. So,
There's no contingent subject to open. It's vested remainder subject to open. Right? Because it's actually redundant. If it's contingent, of course, new people can join. But it is a special kind of vested remainder that's subject to new children being born. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.